The morning sun barely peeked through the tall windows of the downtown courthouse as people slowly filled the waiting area. It was another busy Tuesday, and the juvenile court was about to begin its daily session. Parents sat nervously next to their teenage children, lawyers shuffled through papers, and court clerks prepared for what looked like a long day ahead. Officer Danny Torres had been working courthouse security for over 15 years. He knew this building like the back of his hand, every corner, every hallway, every door that needed watching. But today felt different. The past few weeks had been rough for him. His supervisor had been on his case about paperwork, his partner had retired, leaving him with extra duties, and the morning traffic had made him 20 minutes late to work. Danny stood near the courtroom entrance, watching as families found their seats. His radio crackled occasionally with updates from other officers around the building. He checked his watch and saw that court would start in just 10 minutes. The room was getting crowded, and the noise level was rising as more people arrived. In the third row from the back, 17-year-old Tyler Jackson sat quietly next to his mother. Tyler was a good kid who had never been in trouble before. He was there because of a speeding ticket he had received 3 weeks earlier while rushing to his part-time job at the local grocery store. His mother had taken the morning off work to support him, even though they both knew it was just a simple traffic violation that would probably result in a small fine. Tyler was nervous. He had never been inside a courthouse before, and the formal atmosphere made him feel uncomfortable. He kept fidgeting with his hands and looking around at all the serious faces. His mother whispered encouraging words to him, telling him everything would be fine and that he just needed to be honest and respectful. Behind them, in the very back row, sat a distinguished-looking man in a dark suit. Most people would not have recognized him, but this was Judge Robert Jackson, Tyler's father. He had divorced Tyler's mother when Tyler was young, but he had always stayed involved in his son's life. Today he had quietly rearranged his schedule at the state Supreme Court to be there for Tyler, even though Tyler didn't know he was coming. Judge Jackson believed in letting his son handle his own responsibilities, but he also wanted to be there for moral support. He had not told Tyler he would be attending because he didn't want his son to feel pressure or think that his father's position would somehow help him avoid consequences for his actions. As the clock struck 9, the bailiff called for everyone to rise as Judge Martinez entered the courtroom. The room fell silent as everyone stood up. Judge Martinez was known for running an efficient courtroom while still being fair to the young people who appeared before her. The first few cases moved quickly. A teenager who had been caught with spray paint received community service. Another young person who had been driving without a license was given a stern warning and had to attend driving school. Tyler watched each case carefully, trying to understand how the process worked. Danny Torres stood by the side wall, occasionally walking the perimeter of the room to make sure everything stayed orderly. He noticed that some of the teenagers seemed restless, shifting in their seats and whispering to their parents. The warm morning air was making the room stuffy despite the air conditioning running at full blast. After about an hour of proceedings, the clerk called out Tyler Jackson for case number 2024 TR 5847. Tyler felt his heart jump as he heard his name echo through the room. His mother squeezed his hand and whispered, "You got this," as he stood up to make his way to the front of the courtroom. Tyler had been sitting for over an hour, and his legs felt a bit stiff as he rose from his seat. On the small table in front of him was a plastic water bottle that his mother had brought for him. As he turned to walk toward the front of the room, his knee accidentally bumped the table, causing the water bottle to tip over and roll onto the floor with a loud, clunking sound. The noise seemed much louder than it actually was in the quiet courtroom. Several people turned to look, and Tyler felt his face get hot with embarrassment. He quickly bent down to pick up the bottle, mumbling sorry under his breath. This was the moment when everything went wrong. Danny Torres had been having a stressful morning, and the sound of the bottle hitting the floor felt like the last straw. Instead of recognizing it as a simple accident, he saw it as disrespectful behavior. Without thinking clearly, Danny quickly walked over to Tyler. "Hey, show some respect in this courtroom," Danny said loudly, his voice carrying across the room. Tyler looked up, confused and still holding the water bottle. "I'm sorry, officer, it was just an accident. I didn't mean to." Before Tyler could finish his sentence, Danny's hand moved quickly across Tyler's face in a sharp slap. The sound echoed through the now completely silent courtroom. Tyler stumbled, backward, more shocked than hurt, his hand automatically moving to his cheek. The entire room seemed to freeze. Parents gasped. Some teenagers stood up to get a better look, and even the court reporter stopped typing. Judge Martinez immediately stood up at her bench, her face showing both surprise and anger. "Officer Torres," Judge Martinez called out sharply. "What is the meaning of this?" Tyler stood there, still processing what had just happened. His cheeks stung, but more than that, he felt humiliated in front of all these people. He had never been hit by a police officer before. He had never been hit by any adult other than his parents when he was much younger. Tears began to form in his eyes, but he forced himself not to cry. Danny realized immediately that he had made a terrible mistake. The stress of the morning, the frustration with work, the crowded room, none of it justified what he had just done. He looked around and saw dozens of pairs of eyes staring at him with shock and disapproval. "Your Honor," Danny said, his voice now much quieter. "The defendant was being disruptive and disrespectful to the court. I was just trying to maintain order." But even as he said the words, Danny knew they sounded weak and untrue. Everyone in the room had seen what really happened. Tyler had simply knocked over a water bottle by accident, apologized, and tried to clean it up. There had been nothing disrespectful or disruptive about his behavior. Judge Martinez looked directly at Tyler. "Young man, are you all right?" Tyler nodded, not trusting his voice to speak without shaking. His mother had started to rise from her seat, but Tyler held up his hand to indicate he was okay. "I need to see both of you at the sidebar immediately," Judge Martinez said, pointing to Danny and Tyler. As they walked to the side of the courtroom, Tyler could feel everyone watching him. He tried to walk with dignity despite his embarrassment and the burning sensation on his cheek. Danny walked behind him, already dreading the conversation that was about to happen. In the back of the room, Judge Robert Jackson sat perfectly still, but his hands were clenched into fists. He had watched his son get struck by a police officer for absolutely no reason. Every instinct told him to stand up, identify himself, and demand immediate action. But his years of experience on the bench had taught him the importance of following proper procedures, even when his emotions were running high. Judge Jackson took out a small notebook and began writing down exactly what he had witnessed. He noted the time, the officer's name from his badge, and a detailed description of the incident. He knew that his testimony as a witness would be important, but he also knew that his son's case needed to be handled through the proper legal channels. "Eddie?" The sidebar. Judge Martinez spoke in a low voice that couldn't be heard by the rest of the courtroom. "Officer Torres, what you just did was completely inappropriate and possibly criminal. This young man did nothing wrong, and you had no justification for putting your hands on him." Danny hung his head. "You're right, Your Honor. I don't know what came over me. I've been having a difficult morning, but that's no excuse. I'm truly sorry." Tyler finally found his voice. "Your Honor, I really was just trying to pick up my water bottle. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful to anyone." "I believe you completely," Judge Martinez said to Tyler. "And I want you to know that what just happened to you was wrong and will not be ignored." She turned back to Danny. "Officer Torres, you will write a complete incident report about what happened here today. This young man and his family have every right to file a complaint against you, and I will be reporting this incident to your superiors as well." The three of them returned to their positions, and Judge Martinez addressed the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed was an inappropriate use of force by a law enforcement officer. This court does not tolerate such behavior, and this incident will be properly investigated." She then turned to Tyler. "Mr. Jackson, regarding your traffic violation, you are here today for a speeding ticket. Given what has just occurred, we will reschedule your hearing for next week. You are free to go, and I strongly encourage you and your family to speak with the court clerk about filing a formal complaint." As Tyler walked back to collect his mother, the room remained unusually quiet. In the back, his father continued taking notes, already planning his next steps to ensure that justice would be served. The ride home from the courthouse was quiet. Tyler sat in the passenger seat of his mother's car, staring out the window as familiar streets passed by. His cheek still felt tender where Officer Torres had struck him, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the embarrassment he felt inside. He kept replaying the moment over and over in his mind, wondering if he could have done something differently. His mother, Linda, gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove. She had wanted to march right up to that officer and give him a piece of her mind, but she knew that would only make things worse for Tyler. Instead, she had followed the court clerk's advice and picked up the paperwork needed to file a formal complaint against the officer. "Mom, do you think people will find out about this?" Tyler asked quietly, breaking the silence that had filled the car since they left downtown. Linda glanced at her son and felt her heart break a little. Tyler was a good kid who had never been in trouble. He worked hard in school, had a part-time job, and always tried to do the right thing. The fact that he was now worried about his reputation because of something that wasn't his fault made her angry all over again. "Honey, you did nothing wrong today," she said firmly. "Nothing at all. That officer was completely out of line and everyone in that courtroom saw it." They pulled into the driveway of their modest two-story house in a quiet neighborhood. Tyler had lived here with his mother since his parents divorced when he was 8 years old. It was a comfortable home with a small front yard that Tyler helped maintain and a back porch where he liked to sit and do homework when the weather was nice. Meanwhile, across town at the police station, Officer Danny Torres sat at his desk trying to write his incident report. The words weren't coming easily. How do you explain hitting a teenager for accidentally knocking over a water bottle? How do you justify losing your temper in a courtroom full of witnesses? Danny had been a police officer for 15 years, and he had always prided himself on being professional. Sure, he had his tough days like everyone else, but he had never lost control like this before. He thought about his own teenage son and wondered how he would feel if another officer had treated his boy the way he had treated Tyler. The police station was busy with the usual afternoon activity. Officers were coming and going, phones were ringing, and Danny could hear his supervisor talking loudly on the phone in the next room. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone would want to talk to him about what happened in court. Danny started typing his report, but every sentence he wrote sounded like he was making excuses. He deleted paragraph after paragraph, trying to find the right words to explain his actions. Finally, he settled on a brief description that downplayed the incident and suggested that Tyler had been disruptive, even though he knew that wasn't true. Back at the Jackson house, Tyler had gone up to his room while his mother made some phone calls. She contacted her sister, her best friend, and Tyler's grandmother, telling them what had happened and asking for advice. Everyone was outraged and supportive, which made Linda feel a little better about the situation. Tyler lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. His room was typical for a 17-year-old. Posters of his favorite basketball players on the walls, a desk covered with school books and papers, and a guitar in the corner that he was learning to play. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Tyler heard a car pull into the driveway. He looked out his bedroom window and was surprised to see his father's black sedan parked behind his mother's car. Tyler hadn't expected to see his father today, especially since his parents usually planned visits in advance. Judge Robert Jackson walked slowly up the front steps to the house he used to call home. He still had his key, but he always knocked, out of respect for Linda and Tyler's space. When Linda opened the door, she could see the concern written all over his face. "Robert, what are you doing here?" Linda asked, though not unkindly. Despite their divorce, they had maintained a respectful relationship for Tyler's sake. "I need to talk to you and Tyler," Judge Jackson said quietly. "It's about what happened in court today." Linda looked confused. "How do you know about court?" "Tyler just got his speeding ticket this morning and we haven't had a chance to call you yet." Judge Jackson stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Linda, I was there. I saw the whole thing." The surprise on Linda's face was obvious. "You were there? But Tyler didn't know you were coming. Why didn't you say anything?" "I wanted to be there for moral support, but I didn't want Tyler to feel like I was interfering or trying to use my position to help him avoid consequences," Judge Jackson explained. I sat in the back row and planned to leave without saying anything if everything went smoothly. Linda called for Tyler to come downstairs. When Tyler saw his father standing in their living room, he was both surprised and relieved. Having his father there somehow made him feel safer, even though he wasn't sure why. "Dad? What are you doing here?" Tyler asked as he came down the stairs. Judge Jackson looked at his son and saw the slight redness on his cheek where he had been struck. The sight made his jaw clench with controlled anger, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "Son, I was in the courtroom today. I saw what that officer did to you." Tyler's eyes widened. "You were there? But I didn't see you." "I was in the back. I came to support you, even if you didn't know it." Judge Jackson put his hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Tyler, I want you to know that what happened to you today was completely wrong. That officer had no right to put his hands on you, and there will be consequences for his actions." The three of them sat down in the living room, and Tyler told his father everything that had happened, from the moment his name was called until they left the courthouse. Judge Jackson listened carefully, occasionally asking questions and taking notes in the same small notebook he had used during the incident. "Dad, the court clerk gave us papers to file a complaint, but I don't know if I want to make a big deal out of this," Tyler said. "What if it makes things worse? What if other officers treat me badly because I complained about one of them?" Judge Jackson understood his son's concerns, but he also knew something that Tyler didn't know yet. During his years on the Supreme Court, Judge Jackson had reviewed many cases involving police misconduct. He had seen patterns of behavior that suggested when officers weren't held accountable for smaller incidents, they often escalated to more serious problems. "Tyler, I understand you're worried, but this isn't just about you anymore," Judge Jackson said gently. "After you left the courthouse, I did some research on Officer Torres. This isn't the first complaint filed against him." Linda leaned forward in her chair. "What do you mean?" "I mean that in the past 3 years, there have been 4 other complaints filed against Officer Torres for excessive force or inappropriate behavior. Most of them involved young people, and most of the complaints were dismissed or resulted in minor disciplinary action." Tyler felt a chill run down his spine. "So he's done this before?" "It appears so. And Tyler, if we don't take action now, he'll likely do it again to someone else's child." Judge Jackson explained that he had spent the afternoon reviewing public records and speaking with colleagues who were familiar with the police department's disciplinary procedures. What he found troubled him deeply. Officer Torres had a pattern of complaints, but somehow he had managed to keep his job and continue working in positions where he interacted with the public. The complaints seemed to disappear into bureaucratic processes that resulted in little more than additional training or temporary suspensions. "But Dad, you're a Supreme Court judge," Tyler said. "Can't you just call someone and get this guy fired?" Judge Jackson shook his head. "That's not how justice works, son. My position doesn't give me the right to interfere with other branches of government or law enforcement. If anything, I have to be more careful to follow proper procedures because of my position." He explained that while he could use his knowledge of the legal system to help Tyler navigate the complaint process, he couldn't and wouldn't use his influence to guarantee any particular outcome. The complaint would have to be investigated on its own merits, just like any other citizen's complaint. "However," Judge Jackson continued, "I can make sure that this complaint gets the attention it deserves and that it's investigated thoroughly and fairly." That evening, the three of them sat around the kitchen table and carefully filled out the complaint forms. Tyler described exactly what happened, Linda provided her account as a witness, and Judge Jackson added his observations from the back of the courtroom. As they worked on the paperwork, Judge Jackson told them about some of the other cases he had researched involving Officer Torres. There was a college student who claimed Torres had used excessive force during a traffic stop. There was a teenage girl who said Torres had been inappropriate and threatening when she was reporting a stolen bicycle. There was even a complaint from another police officer who said Torres had used unnecessary aggression during an arrest. "The problem is that each complaint was handled separately," Judge Jackson explained. "Nobody was looking at the bigger picture to see that this was a pattern of behavior." Tyler listened to these stories and began to understand that his experience wasn't unique. Other people had been treated badly by this same officer, and most of them probably felt just as scared and powerless as he did right now. By the time they finished the paperwork, it was getting dark outside. Judge Jackson promised to personally deliver the complaint to the appropriate authorities the next morning, and to follow up to make sure it was properly investigated. As Tyler got ready for bed that night, he thought about everything his father had told him. He was still scared about what might happen next, but he also felt a sense of responsibility to make sure Officer Torres couldn't treat other people the way he had been treated. The next morning, Police Chief David Rodriguez sat at his desk with a cup of coffee, going through the usual stack of reports and paperwork that came with running a large city police department. It was barely 8 o'clock, but his phone was already ringing with the first crisis of the day. Chief Rodriguez, this is Judge Robert Jackson from the State Supreme Court. I need to speak with you about an incident involving one of your officers yesterday. Chief Rodriguez nearly choked on his coffee. It wasn't every day that a Supreme Court judge called him directly, especially this early in the morning. Judge Jackson was well respected throughout the state's legal community, known for his fairness and dedication to justice. Of course, Your Honor. What can I do for you? Yesterday, one of your officers, Danny Torres, struck my 17-year-old son in a courthouse during a routine traffic hearing. I was present and witnessed the entire incident. The words hit Chief Rodriguez like a punch to the stomach. He had been running this police department for 8 years and had worked hard to build trust with the community. An incident like this could destroy years of progress, especially when it involved the family of such a prominent judge. Your Honor, I am deeply sorry to hear this. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Judge Jackson calmly explained the events from the previous day, speaking like the experienced legal professional he was. He described Tyler's accidental spilling of the water bottle, Officer Torres' completely inappropriate response, and the shocked reaction of everyone in the courtroom. Chief Rodriguez, I want to be clear about something, Judge Jackson continued. I'm not calling you as a Supreme Court judge trying to use my position to get special treatment. I'm calling as a citizen and a father who witnessed police misconduct. My son's case should be handled exactly the same way you would handle any other citizen's complaint. Chief Rodriguez appreciated the judge's approach, but he also understood the seriousness of the situation. I understand completely, Your Honor. I will personally oversee the investigation into this matter. Can you come in today to give an official statement? After hanging up the phone, Chief Rodriguez immediately called for Officer Torres' supervisor, Lieutenant Patricia Hayes. Lieutenant Hayes had been with the department for 12 years and was known for her no-nonsense approach to discipline and training. Pat, I need you to pull the file on Danny Torres and bring it to my office right now, Chief Rodriguez said when she arrived. Lieutenant Hayes could tell from the chief's tone that something serious was happening. She returned 15 minutes later with a thick folder containing Torres' employment records, training certificates, and disciplinary history. As they went through the file together, a troubling pattern emerged. Over the past 3 years, there had been 4 previous complaints against Torres, all involving excessive force or inappropriate behavior. Each complaint had been investigated separately, and while Torres had received additional training and brief suspensions, no one had looked at the bigger picture. Pat, how did we miss this pattern? Chief Rodriguez asked, shaking his head as he read through the complaints. Each complaint was handled by different supervisors, and Torres always had reasonable explanations, Lieutenant Hayes replied. Plus, some of the complaints were withdrawn when the complainants decided they didn't want to pursue the matter. Well, this one isn't going away. We need to suspend Torres immediately and launch a full investigation. Meanwhile, Officer Danny Torres was at home having just finished his morning workout. He was trying to put the previous day's incident out of his mind and prepare for another day of work. His wife Carol was getting their 2 teenage children ready for school when his phone rang. Danny, this is Lieutenant Hayes. I need you to come to the station immediately. Don't report to your regular assignment. Danny felt his stomach drop. He had been a police officer long enough to know that a call like this usually meant serious trouble. What's this about, Lieutenant? We'll discuss it when you get here. Just come straight to my office. The drive to the police station felt like the longest 20 minutes of Danny's life. He kept thinking about the incident in the courthouse and wondering if someone had filed a complaint. Part of him hoped that everyone would just forget about it and move on. But deep down, he knew that wasn't going to happen. When Danny arrived at the station, Lieutenant Hayes was waiting for him with Chief Rodriguez. The serious expressions on their faces told him everything he needed to know. "Danny, sit down," Chief Rodriguez said. "We need to talk about what happened in Judge Martinez's courtroom yesterday." Danny sat down heavily in the chair across from the chief's desk. "Look, Chief, I know I made a mistake. The kid was being disruptive and I reacted too quickly. It won't happen again." "Danny, the father of that kid, is Judge Robert Jackson from the state Supreme Court," Chief Rodriguez said, quietly. "He witnessed the entire incident and has filed a formal complaint against you." The color drained from Danny's face. Judge Jackson was one of the most respected legal figures in the state. Danny had heard other officers talk about cases that had gone before the Supreme Court, and Judge Jackson's name always came up with respect and sometimes fear. "Chief, I had no idea who that kid's father was. I would never have—" "Stop right there," Chief Rodriguez interrupted. "Are you telling me that you would have treated that young man differently if you had known who his father was?" Danny realized. He had just walked into a trap of his own making. "No, sir, that's not what I meant. Danny, let me explain something to you," Chief Rodriguez continued. "Judge Jackson specifically told me that he wants his son's case handled exactly like any other citizen's complaint. He's not looking for special treatment, but that doesn't change the fact that you struck a 17-year-old boy for accidentally knocking over a water bottle." Lieutenant Hayes opened Danny's personnel file and spread the previous complaints across the desk. "Danny, we've been reviewing your record, and this isn't the first time we've had this conversation." As Danny looked at the papers in front of him, he began to see his own behavior from a different perspective. Each individual incident had seemed minor at the time, but seeing them all together painted a picture of someone who had been gradually losing control over the years. "Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation," Chief Rodriguez announced. "You will surrender your badge, weapon, and police credentials. The district attorney's office will also be reviewing this case for possible criminal charges." Danny felt like the world was crashing down around him. In one moment of poor judgment, he had potentially destroyed his career and his family's financial security. His wife didn't know what had happened yet, and he dreaded having to tell her and their children. Over the next few days, the investigation moved quickly. Multiple witnesses from the courthouse were interviewed, including other parents, teenagers, and court staff who had seen the incident. Security cameras from the courthouse hallways were reviewed, though unfortunately, there were no cameras inside the actual courtroom. Tyler had to give his statement to internal affairs investigators, which was nerve-wracking but important. His father accompanied him to the interview, not as a judge but as a supportive parent. Tyler told his story clearly and honestly, describing exactly what had happened without exaggerating or trying to make the incident sound worse than it was. The Q. Investigators also spoke with Judge Martinez, who confirmed that Tyler had done nothing wrong, and that Officer Torres's actions were completely unjustified. She explained that she had been presiding over juvenile court for 6 years and had never seen such an inappropriate response from a law enforcement officer. As the investigation continued, Danny Torres found himself with time to think about his actions and their consequences. Without the daily routine of police work, he spent long hours at home, replaying not just the courthouse incident but all the other complaints that had been filed against him over the years. His wife Carol was shocked and disappointed when she learned what had happened. Their own children were teenagers, and she couldn't understand how Danny could treat someone else's child so poorly. "Danny, what if that had been our son?" Carol asked during one of their difficult conversations. "What if some police officer had hit Kevin for accidentally dropping something?" The question hit Danny like a physical blow. His son Kevin was the same age as Tyler, played on the high school basketball team, and worked weekends at a local restaurant to save money for college. Kevin was a good kid, just like Tyler seemed to be. As part of the disciplinary process, Danny was required to attend counseling sessions and participate in community service while his case was being reviewed. The community service assignment was at a youth center in the neighborhood where Tyler lived, which felt like more than just a coincidence. The Roosevelt Community Center served dozens of teenagers from the local area, providing after-school programs, sports activities, and mentoring services. Many of the kids who came to the center had difficult home situations, struggled in school, or had had negative experiences with law enforcement. On Danny's first day at the center, the director, Mrs. Johnson, assigned him to help with maintenance work and basic administrative tasks. She made it clear that he would not be allowed to work directly with the children until he had proven himself trustworthy. "Officer Torres," Mrs. Johnson said, "many of these kids have reasons to be afraid of police officers. Your job here is to show them that not all officers are the same. But first, you need to prove that to me." Over the following weeks, Danny found himself listening to stories from teenagers who had experienced harassment, unfair treatment, or worse from police officers. Some of the stories were similar to his own pattern of behavior, and hearing them from the perspective of the young people involved was eye-opening. One afternoon, a 16-year-old named Carlos told Danny about being stopped by police while walking home from school. The officer had been aggressive and accusatory, treating Carlos like a criminal even though he had done nothing wrong. "The worst part wasn't that he searched my backpack," Carlos explained. "The worst part was how he talked to me, like I was already guilty of something just because of how I looked." As Danny listened to these stories, he began to understand the impact his actions had on young people and their families. Each incident he had been involved in wasn't just a moment of poor judgment. It was an experience that shaped how those young people viewed law enforcement and authority figures. For years to come, 6 months had passed since that terrible morning in the courthouse, and the case against Officer Danny Torres was finally ready to go to trial. The district attorney had decided to press charges for assault, even though it was a misdemeanor. Casey, they felt it was important to send a message that police officers weren't above the law, no matter how minor the incident might seem. Tyler Jackson sat in his high school cafeteria, eating lunch with his friends. Life had mostly returned to normal for him, but he still thought about that day regularly. Some of his classmates knew what had happened because the story had appeared in the local newspaper, but Tyler tried not to let it define him. His grades had stayed strong throughout the ordeal, and he had even been accepted to several colleges for the following year. His part-time job at the grocery store had helped him save money, and his boss had been very supportive when Tyler needed time off for court appearances and meetings with lawyers. "Tyler, are you nervous about the trial next week?" his best friend, Kevin, asked as they sat at their usual table. Tyler thought for a moment before answering, "Yeah, I'm nervous, but I also feel like it's important to see this through. If I don't stand up for myself, then Officer Torres might do the same thing to someone else." Tyler's perspective had changed a lot over the past 6 months. At first, he had just wanted the whole thing to go away. But as he learned more about Officer Torres's history and heard stories from other young people who had similar experiences, he realized that his case was bigger than just what happened to him personally. Meanwhile, Danny Torres was spending his morning at the Roosevelt Community Center, where he had been volunteering for the past 4 months. What had started as required community service had become something much more meaningful to him. Mrs. Johnson, the center director, had gradually allowed Danny to take on more responsibilities as he proved himself trustworthy. He now helped with homework tutoring, organized sports equipment, and even assisted with some of the center's community outreach programs. "Danny, can you help me move these boxes to the storage room?" asked Angela, one of the center's full-time staff members. "Of course," Danny replied, grateful for any task that kept him busy and useful. As they worked together, Angela mentioned that she had heard about Danny's upcoming court case. "Are you scared about next week?" Danny paused in his lifting. "Terrified," he admitted. "But I know I deserve whatever happens. I just hope I can continue working here afterward, regardless of the outcome." The work at the community center had opened Danny's eyes in ways he never expected. He had spent his career as a police officer thinking he understood the community he served, but he realized now that he had only seen people during their worst moments, when they were in trouble, scared, or angry. At the center, he saw these same young people in a different light. He watched teenagers help elderly community members with grocery shopping. He saw kids who struggled in schoolwork incredibly hard to improve their grades. He met young people who were working part-time jobs to help support their families while still trying to graduate from high school. One teenager in particular, a 17-year-old named Miguel, had made a big impression on Danny. Miguel had been arrested twice for minor offenses, and Danny remembered thinking that kids like Miguel were just troublemakers who didn't respect authority. But working at the center, Danny learned that Miguel was actually helping to raise his 3 younger siblings while his mother worked 2 jobs to pay rent. "Officer Torres," Miguel had said to him one afternoon, "I know you're here because you got in trouble, but I want you to know that you're different from the other cops I've met. You actually listen to us." Comments like that from Miguel and other teenagers made Danny realize how much damage his previous behavior had caused, not just to the individuals he had treated badly, but to the relationship between police and the community as a whole. The week of the trial arrived faster than anyone expected. The courthouse was the same building where the original incident had occurred, which felt strange to everyone involved. Tyler arrived with his parents, and he could see the stress on both their faces, even though they were trying to be strong for him. Judge Jackson had taken time off from his Supreme Court duties to attend the trial, not as a judge, but as a father, supporting his son. He sat in the gallery with Linda, Tyler's mother, holding her hand as they waited for proceedings to begin. Danny Torres entered the courtroom with his lawyer and his wife Carol. He had lost weight over the past 6 months, and the stress of the situation showed on his face. When he saw Tyler across the room, he felt a wave of shame wash over him. The trial itself was relatively straightforward. The prosecutor presented evidence from multiple witnesses who had seen the incident, including Judge Jackson's testimony about what he had observed from the back of the courthouse that day. The courthouse security video from the hallways showed Tyler and his mother arriving that morning, and Tyler could be seen carrying the water bottle that would later cause the incident. Tyler took the witness stand and told his story calmly and clearly. He described arriving at court for his speeding ticket, accidentally knocking over his water bottle, and then being struck by Officer Torres without warning or justification. "Tyler, did you do anything that day to threaten or disrespect Officer Torres?" the prosecutor asked. "No, ma'am. I was nervous about being in court, but I was trying to be respectful. When I knocked over my water bottle, I immediately said I was sorry and tried to pick it up. How did it feel when Officer Torres struck you?" Tyler paused, remembering that moment. "I was shocked. I couldn't understand why he had done that. I felt embarrassed because everyone was looking at me, and I felt scared because I didn't know if he was going to do something else." When it was time for the defense, Danny's lawyer argued that his client had been under stress and had made a mistake in judgment. The lawyer pointed out that Danny had no prior criminal record and that he had been volunteering at the community center, showing that he was trying to make amends for his actions. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Danny Torres took the witness stand to speak for himself. "I want to start by apologizing to Tyler Jackson and his family," Danny said, looking directly at Tyler. "What I did that day was wrong. There is no excuse for striking a teenager who had done nothing but accidentally knock over a water bottle." Danny went on to describe how the past 6 months had changed his perspective. He talked about his work at the community center and the teenagers he had met there. He explained how he had come to understand the impact his actions had on young people and their families. "I used to think that being tough and assertive was what made me a good police officer," Danny continued, "but I've learned that real strength comes from treating people with respect and dignity, especially when they're young and vulnerable." The prosecutor cross-examined Danny, asking him about the previous complaints that had been filed against him over the years. Danny acknowledged that there had been a pattern of behavior and that he had been making excuses instead of taking responsibility for his actions. "Officer Torres, if you could go back to that day in the courthouse, what would you do differently?" the prosecutor asked. "I would remember that Tyler Jackson is someone's son, just like my own children are someone's sons," Danny replied. "I would remember that he was probably nervous about being in court, just like any teenager would be. And I would remember that my job is to protect and serve people like Tyler, not to intimidate or hurt them." After both sides presented their closing arguments, the judge retired to consider the verdict. It didn't take long. Judge Wilson returned to the courtroom after just 30 minutes of deliberation. "Officer Torres, please stand," Judge Wilson said. "I find you guilty of assault in the 4th degree." Danny stood quietly as the judge continued. "However, I also want to acknowledge the work you have done over the past 6 months to make amends for your actions. The letters I have received from the Roosevelt Community Center speak highly of your contributions there, and your testimony today shows genuine remorse and understanding." Judge Wilson sentenced Danny to 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management counseling. He also ordered Danny to write a formal letter of apology to Tyler and to participate in a community dialogue program about police-community relations. "Officer Torres, I hope you will continue the work you have been doing at the community center," Judge Wilson said. "Our community needs police officers who understand the impact of their actions and who are committed to building trust rather than breaking it down." As the court session ended, Tyler felt a mixture of relief and closure. Justice had been served, but more importantly, he felt like Officer Torres had genuinely learned from the experience. Outside the courthouse, Judge Jackson spoke briefly with reporters who had covered the trial. "This case was never about my position as a Supreme Court judge," he said. "It was about ensuring that all citizens, regardless of their age or background, are treated with dignity and respect by those who are sworn to protect and serve them." A year later, Tyler was finishing his freshman year of college, studying criminal justice with the goal of becoming a lawyer like his father. He had been invited to speak at several community events about his experience and the importance of police accountability. Danny Torres had completed his probation and continued volunteering at the Roosevelt Community Center. The police department had not offered to reinstate him, but Danny had discovered a new calling working with young people. He had enrolled in courses to become a certified youth counselor and was considering a career change. The most surprising development came when Tyler and Danny were both invited to participate in a community forum about police reform. Standing on the same stage together, they told their story to a packed auditorium of community members, police officers, and city officials. "What happened between Officer Torres and me was wrong," Tyler told the audience. "But what happened afterward? The accountability, the learning, and the growth. That's what gives me hope for the future." Danny nodded in agreement. "Tyler Jackson taught me more about being a good person in one day than I had learned in 15 years as a police officer. I'm grateful that he and his family chose to pursue justice rather than revenge, because it gave me the chance to become someone better." Their story became a model for how communities can address police misconduct while still allowing for redemption and growth. It showed that justice doesn't always have to be about punishment. Sometimes, it can be about learning, understanding, and building a better future for everyone.